So hello and welcome to the latest edition of Business Spotlight. I'm joined today by Duncan Smith, the Managing Director of MindLab. Duncan, welcome to the call. It's good to see you.
You too. Hello.
Duncan, tell us a little bit about MindLab, where you're based and what it is that you do.
So we're a market research company. We're based in Brighton on the south coast, and we're normally market research asks people questions, but what we try and do is apply a bit of a psychological lens on how people make decisions. So what we do is we measure gut feelings and intuitive perceptions because they're a really good guide of how people are ultimately likely to behave. So we work for companies like, maybe TikTok, Uber, Diageo, and Boots, those sort of large companies.
You've gone straight in there with gut feeling and intuition. As a scientist myself, and I know you take a very scientific approach to that, explain to us a little bit about how you bring science to gut instinct.
So there was a really famous book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Now, Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist. He actually won the Nobel Prize for Economics because he was basically coming up with the principles of what we see as behavioral science and behavioral economics. Came up with this idea of system one thinking and system two thinking. It's a very simplified model, but system one is unconscious processing. It's all where your emotions are and your gut feelings. And system two is your rational, the you listening to me now. So the rational and the conscious. Now, most of us think that we live very much in a rational world where we weigh A up against B and we make a logical decision. But the truth of it is our intuitive perceptions, our gut feelings, everything we've done in the past, what that actually does is that guides our decision making. So this system one decision making is accountable for about 80% or so of the decision making processes. So essentially what we're trying to do is not just rely on self-report, we're trying to get in under the sort of bonnet of how people make decisions.
So you're actually analyzing effectively how the emotional response of individuals to certain stimuli in a message, in a marketing message or something of that nature.
That's true. Yeah, it is that, but it's not just emotions. So this unconscious decision-making area that we call system one, essentially that has our emotions there, but it also has a lot of other mental shortcuts that we make. We can't procrastinate and consciously evaluate every decision. So we have these things called heuristics or mental shortcuts, which actually make life easier, but it does mean that we sometimes behave in a way that seems to be predictably irrational.
I like the fact that it's predictably irrational. It reminds me a little bit of the work of Professor Stephen Peters. I don't know if you're familiar with him and the chimp paradox and how he explains how the computer brain, the rational brain, and the sort of the subconscious brain work together. It sounds fascinating and very different to perhaps what a lot of other agencies in your field do. So what led you to take this kind of approach with your clients? What was the inspiration?
So going back 15, 20 years ago, MindLab was a different type of company. We were very much academically based. We used to literally wire people's brains up and measure brain activity, used eye tracking, wired people up for their physiological reactions to see how people actually reacted to different stimulus. And what we were trying to do is understand what's going on in people's heads without having to ask them. So that was the principle behind what we did. What we have done, fast forwarded, is built an online platform where we can test lots of people using statistically significant differences between the sample sizes that we have. Just makes it a little bit more manageable. So we've moved out of the lab, and one of the biggest things for us as a marker of success is when we started to call ourselves a market research company. We used to sit on the periphery saying we were a neuromarketing company, and people were really excited. This is fascinating, but we don't have budget for your stuff. And then I say, well, actually, a neuromarketing company that's a market research company. They go, now we've got budget, come and have a chat. So it's all how you position yourselves, I think, which is part of the success.
That was absolutely fascinating. So what sort of customer would come and talk to you? What would give us an idea of their profile?
So most of the time we work with larger organizations that have done market research for many, many years. we're drowning in too much data now, and there's lots of people that are willing to give their advice and answer surveys, but we're looking at people, insight managers and insight directors, research managers in companies like Diageo, who makes Smirnoff and Guinness, or Boots, for example. They're looking to get by the differences that they see between what people say and what they do, because it's not that people lie when they're conducting research, it's just that we don't always know why we made the decisions we do. So what we tend to do is we find people who will just want to do that little bit deeper, or get a little bit more granular into the detail of the difference between concept A and concept B and how it fits in people's minds. Because what we do is essentially look at, we have like a network of associations around our brain for all different concepts and ideas. So we're trying to see if we prime somebody with one communication and another group with a different communication, which of these associations are strengthened and weakened, and which are more joined together by presenting something one way or another, to give our clients a better idea how their ideas are going to actually play out in the marketplace, or the better way to present them to customers, whether that be rebrands of existing products and services, or something completely new.
Right, okay. So what sort of people do you recruit to work with you, Duncan? What's their background to help you in this process?
There isn't a background for the people that work with us. We learned through our mistakes over the years, and it is not just about having superstars that are incredibly bright. We're based on campus at Sussex University in Brighton, so we have access to some really bright minds. But what we need is people that are creative. The success to how MindLab has done over the last few years has been about looking at attitude as opposed to aptitude, because we can look at that with people's CV. It looks a great CV. You need people that actually gel. That's really the key thing. But to go back to your first question, we're sort of split in two. We have what we call the dev team, which are the analysts, the experiment builders, and the developers. And they tend to have a physics or a maths background. And then we have the project management team. They're the people that will interact with clients, write the reports, weave a narrative through the research that we do. And they tend to have a background in psychology or neuroscience, but we have quite a few people who have English or English literature or language background as well.
I'm smiling because I tick both of those boxes, Duncan. I'm a physicist by training, and I'm a qualified cognitive behavioral psychologist as well. So I wouldn't know which part of your team I would want to be in, but it sounds really, really fascinating. There's an awful lot of analytics going on at the moment in the world. We're hearing a lot about AI and those sorts of things. Do you see what you do as an opportunity for growth? Do you see it as something that is under threat, or is it a threat or an opportunity type scenario for you, would you say, going forwards?
It's both. So we've used what people term AI for quite a few years. It's essentially what's called machine learning. So it's about basically throwing data into a computer and getting it to make some models and then spitting back out its thoughts. So we've used that. When we used to wire people's brains up, we try to see, what is the brain activity when people are happy, or sad, or engaged. And we were using that machine learning to basically prime our machines to be more effective. But what's happened since the era of ChatGPT, which is only last November, is the opportunities are huge, but so are the threats. I don't think most people understand quite how this is going to affect people. So what we've already been able to use these natural language models essentially in our research. So one thing that we've always done is relied on what we call implicit testing, measuring gut feelings and intuitive perceptions that I said. But we also ask people what they think about stuff. Why wouldn't we? Of course. So sometimes with surveys, you've got tick boxes and radio grids and all these other, small ways of getting explicit information from people. But the open responses can be quite useful, where people say things about their experience with something similar, or people can elaborate on what their thought processes are. And it takes a long time to analyze the sentiment from thousands of responses. So we're working in lots of different markets, we're translating things back into English, and then trying to look at sentiment analysis. Using an AI model can be really good. So we used to use a third party, but we've just built now essentially a chatbot, But the chatbot can be told exactly what it is, what it should be thinking, how it should behave, and what it's trying to get out of people. So we gave before an open response question. People said, what do you think about the glass bottle? People say, I really love the blue glass. It looks really good. And wrote something else, for example, because most people only write 1 or 2 points. Then the chatbot will say, oh, it's really interesting that you talked about the blue glass. What was it in particular that made you say that? Or is there a specific setting that you think this would work well in? So what we're able to do is gather more and more information. So it's an intelligent way of gleaning more detail from people by asking much more intelligent questions. And it's AI that's doing that. So actually, we're creating more data to analyze, but we can then feed it back into a similar model that's called Bard. It's similar to ChatGPT, and it can then summarize all of our responses, and it gives it us in a format that's really easy to incorporate into our reports. So already we're finding it's a really, really useful way of making life easier for ourselves and for our clients, giving them more insight without charging them more. But just to add to that, the potential for us is huge. Can you imagine being able to talk to data sets? So we've talked before about personas, and market research companies have different personas of their customers. You've got this customer, that customer, the XY customer. What if you could chat to these groups of people, but you're chatting to all the data that makes up these people? So this is one of the things that we're working on, and I'm sure lots of others as well. So the opportunity is absolutely huge for using this, but there are massive threats for making sure that security and privacy is adhered to, but also making sure that all players in the marketplace adhere to the rules, and that's always going to be one of the issues.
It's what a fascinating subject. In fact, 3 or 4 fascinating themes coming through this conversation today, including how you recruit your team members, etc. It's been a real privilege to talk to you today, Duncan, and I want to thank you for being involved. I think there's an awful lot here for a lot of people, so I look forward to sharing that out.
Thank you.